A heart, heavy as stone, wandered a desert of ash, seeking a fire it could not name. Beneath a sky bruised purple with storm, Elior trudged, his sandals worn to threads, his cloak tattered by winds that howled like mourning widows. His eyes, once bright as dawn, now mirrored the cracked earth beneath his feet, barren, thirsting, lost. Long ago, he had been a man of wealth, his laughter echoing through marble halls, his table laden with bread and wine. But pride had birthed betrayal, and betrayal had birthed exile. He had wounded those he loved, his tongue sharper than any blade, his heart colder than the frost that clung to the desert's edge at night. Now, alone, he sought a whisper of forgiveness, a flicker of hope, though he knew not where to find it. The desert stretched endless, a sea of dunes that shimmered like molten glass under a merciless sun. Elior's throat burned, his lips cracked, each breath a labor. He carried no water, for he believed he deserved none. His sin clung to him like dust, a weight no wind could scatter. Years ago, he had stood in the village square, accusing his brother of theft to shield his own greed. The crowd had turned, his brother's eyes had wept, and Elior had fled, his heart a fortress of lies. Now, those lies were chains, binding him to this wasteland where shadows danced like specters of his past. Days bled into nights, and the stars above offered no answers, only silence. Elior stumbled, his knees kissing the sand, his hands clawing at the earth as if it might yield mercy. "Why?" he whispered to the void. "Why am I forsaken?" The wind answered only with its wail, carrying the scent of distant rain he could not reach. Yet, in that moment, a faint glow flickered on the horizon, a trembling light, no brighter than a candle's flame, pulsing against the dark. Elior rose, drawn to it as a moth to fire, his heart pounding with a hope he dared not name. The journey to the light was a crucible. Storms rose, hurling sand that stung like wasps, tearing at his flesh. He climbed dunes that crumbled beneath him, each step a battle against despair. His body screamed for rest, but his soul pressed on, driven by a longing deeper than hunger, deeper than thirst. The light grew, now a beacon, now a blaze, until he reached a valley where a single tree stood, its branches ablaze with fire that did not consume. The flames danced, red and gold, weaving patterns of light that seemed to breathe. Elior fell to his knees, trembling, for the air was thick with a presence he could not see but felt in his bones. "Who are you?" Elior whispered, his voice barely a breath. The fire roared, and from its heart came a voice, not of sound but of silence, piercing his soul. "Why do you seek me, wanderer, when you flee yourself?" Elior's heart seized, for the voice knew him, knew the lies, the betrayal, the shame that festered like a wound. Tears carved rivers down his dust-caked face. "I am unworthy," he choked. "I have broken all I loved. I cannot be forgiven." The flames surged, their heat a caress, not a burn. "You seek forgiveness, but first you must forgive," the voice said. "Your brother weeps not for your sin, but for your absence." Elior's mind reeled. Images flooded him, his brother's face, lined with sorrow, not anger, the village, waiting not to condemn but to embrace. The fire's light pierced his darkness, revealing a truth he had buried: his sin was not his end, but his beginning. He wept, not from shame, but from a dawning joy, a realization that grace was not earned but given. The flames parted, and a figure emerged, radiant as the sun, cloaked in light yet human in form. Its eyes held Elior's, and in them, he saw not judgment but love, a love that burned away his chains, leaving only freedom. The figure stretched out a hand, and from it flowed water, clear and cool, pooling at Elior's feet. He drank, and it was as if life itself filled him, washing away the dust of his guilt. "Return," the figure said, "and carry this fire within you." The flames of the tree dimmed, sinking into Elior's chest, a warmth that did not burn but sustained. He rose, no longer a wanderer, but a man reborn, his heart a lamp lit by divine mercy. Elior turned from the valley, the desert no longer a wasteland but a path. The storms had ceased, the sky now a tapestry of stars. He walked, not alone, but guided by the fire within, its light casting shadows that danced not as specters but as promises. Days later, he reached the village. His brother stood at the gate, older, weathered, but with eyes that sparkled like streams. No words were needed, their embrace spoke forgiveness, a bridge rebuilt over years of pain. The village gathered, not to curse but to celebrate, for the lost had returned. Elior lived his days thereafter with a quiet strength, his hands building what his pride once tore down. He spoke of the fire, the voice, the water, not as a tale of miracles, but as a truth etched in his soul, that no heart is too heavy, no sin too deep, for the light of grace to reach. And when he died, an old man surrounded by love, the village spoke of him not as Elior the betrayer, but Elior the redeemed, whose flame never dimmed. The desert remains, vast and silent, its sands whispering to those who wander, seek the fire, drink the water, and find your way home. For in the heart of every storm, there is a light that waits, not to consume, but to restore. A soul, once kindled, cannot hide its flame, yet shadows linger where light dares to tread. Elior, no longer the wanderer but a man reborn, stood at the edge of his village, his heart still warm with the fire of that divine encounter. The desert's dust no longer clung to his robes, but its echoes haunted his dreams, visions of dunes that whispered doubt, of winds that carried voices of those he had yet to heal. The village had embraced him, his brother's arms a haven, but beyond the mud-brick homes and olive groves, a deeper calling stirred. A storm brewed on the horizon, not of sand but of hearts, and Elior knew his light was not meant to rest. The sun bled crimson as he set out, his staff striking the earth with purpose. The fire within him pulsed, a quiet rhythm urging him toward a distant city, Kadesh, where stone towers loomed like giants and the cries of the broken rose like smoke. Elior had heard tales of Kadesh, a place of wealth where merchants traded gold for souls, where the poor were crushed beneath chariot wheels, and where priests offered empty prayers to gods of their own making. His heart ached, for he knew the weight of a soul turned to ash, and the fire within him burned to bring light to that darkness. The road to Kadesh was a gauntlet of trials. Winds howled, tearing at his cloak, as if the desert itself sought to turn him back. Thorns snagged his flesh, drawing blood that stained the earth like an offering. Hunger gnawed, and his water skin ran dry, yet the fire in his chest sustained him, its warmth a promise that he was not alone. At night, he slept beneath stars that seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as his heart, their light a map guiding him onward. But doubt crept in, a shadow coiling around his thoughts. Who was he, a man once broken, to carry such a flame? What could one spark do against a city's darkness? In Kadesh, the air was thick with incense and despair. Markets buzzed with voices haggling over silks and spices, while beggars reached with trembling hands, ignored by those whose robes glittered with wealth. Elior walked the streets, his eyes tracing the faces of the lost, a child with hollow cheeks, a woman whose tears carved paths through dust, a man whose fists clenched as if to fight the heavens. The fire within him surged, a heat that demanded he act, but fear rooted him. He was no prophet, no king, only Elior, the betrayer redeemed. Yet the voice from the burning tree echoed in his soul, "Carry this fire." The struggle deepened as days passed. Elior spoke in the squares, his voice trembling at first, telling of the light that found him in the desert, of the water that cleansed his shame. Some listened, their eyes flickering with hope, but others mocked, their laughter sharp as flint. The city's priests, draped in robes of crimson and gold, called him a heretic, their words venomous, their power vast. One night, they seized him, dragging him to a stone courtyard where a crowd gathered, their faces a sea of anger and fear. "Blasphemer," they cried, stones in hand, ready to snuff out his light. Elior's heart thundered, the fire within him roaring like a furnace. He saw his brother's face in his mind, the village's embrace, the desert's flame, all leading to this moment. He raised his hands, not in defense but in surrender, and spoke, his voice steady as stone. "I was lost, as you are. I was broken, as you are. But a fire found me, not to burn but to heal. It waits for you, too, if you dare to seek it." The crowd stilled, their stones heavy in their hands. The fire in Elior's chest blazed, and for a moment, the courtyard glowed, not with torchlight but with something divine, something that pierced the dark. A woman stepped forward, the one with tears like rivers. She dropped her stone, her hands trembling as she knelt. "I want that fire," she whispered. Then another, the child with hollow cheeks, his eyes wide with wonder. One by one, the crowd's anger melted, their stones falling like rain. The priests, faces pale, fled into the shadows, their power broken by a light they could not name. Water flowed from a cracked fountain nearby, its trickle a song of renewal, and the people drank, their faces lifted to a sky now clear of storm. Elior did not stay in Kadesh. The fire urged him onward, to other cities, other hearts. He left behind a spark, kindled in those who had listened, who had drunk from the fountain of grace. Kadesh changed, its markets quieter, its hands gentler, its prayers truer. Elior walked on, his staff worn, his body weary, but his soul alight. Years later, when his hair was white as frost, he returned to his village, his brother waiting at the gate. They embraced, and Elior spoke of the cities he had seen, the hearts he had touched, the fire that never dimmed. When Elior's eyes closed for the last time, the village mourned, but their tears were not of loss but of awe. For they knew the fire he carried had spread, a flame that leaped from heart to heart, unquenched by wind or stone. The desert, the city, the world, all bore its mark. And those who heard his story, who felt its warmth, carried it still, whispering to the broken, "Seek the fire, find the water, and let your light burn." A spark, once kindled, can set the world ablaze, but even the brightest flame must face its final storm. Elior, now old, his hair like snow, his eyes etched with the weight of countless journeys, stood on a hill overlooking his village. The fire within him, born in a desert's burning tree, still glowed, though his body bent like a reed in the wind. Decades had passed since Kadesh, since the stones fell unused, since the fountain's water washed a city clean. The light he carried had spread, through villages, across plains, into hearts that once knew only shadow. Yet now, a new darkness loomed, not of men or cities, but of time itself, whispering that his days were few. His heart, though warm, trembled with a question: had his flame been enough? The hill was barren, its grass scorched by a summer's unrelenting sun. Below, the village slept under a sky heavy with stars, their light faint against a creeping fog that rolled from the desert's edge. Elior leaned on his staff, its wood polished by years of wandering, and gazed at the horizon. He had walked countless roads, spoken to thousands, beggars, kings, widows, thieves, each touched by the fire he bore. But doubt, that old shadow, coiled anew. Had he reached enough? Had the light truly changed the world, or was it but a flicker against an endless night? The wind carried no answers, only the scent of dust and distant rain. His final journey began not by choice, but by a pull within, the fire urging him toward the desert once more. He walked, his steps slow, each one a prayer. The dunes rose like waves frozen in time, their crests glowing silver under a moon that hung low, heavy with light. His body ached, his breath shallow, yet the fire burned steady, a beacon in his chest. Days blurred into nights, and hunger became a companion, its bite softened by the warmth within. He saw visions, his brother's smile, the woman's tears in Kadesh, the child's wide eyes, each a thread in the tapestry of his life. But the desert was silent, its vastness a mirror of his fear. Would the fire die with him? On the seventh night, he reached a valley, its floor cracked like broken clay. A single stone stood at its center, smooth and black, reflecting the stars like a pool of ink. Elior knelt, his knees sinking into the earth, and the fire within him surged, hot and fierce, as if answering a call. The air grew heavy, the stars dimmed, and a wind rose, not harsh but gentle, carrying the scent of water and myrrh. From the stone came a light, not blinding but soft, like dawn's first breath. It wove around Elior, threading through his bones, his blood, his soul. A voice, not of sound but of eternity, spoke, "Why do you fear, bearer of my flame? Did you think it yours to keep?" Elior wept, his tears falling like rain upon the cracked earth. "I am frail," he said. "My time ends, and I fear the dark will swallow what I've sown." The light pulsed, and the voice answered, the fire was never yours, but mine. You carried it, but it does not die with you. Look. The valley bloomed with light, sparks rising from the earth like fireflies, each a soul he had touched, each a flame kindled by his own. They swirled, a constellation of lives, his brother, the woman of Kadesh, the child grown old, and countless others, their light stretching beyond the horizon, across deserts, over seas, into the heart of the world. The climax came not in thunder, but in silence. The light from the stone enveloped Elior, and he saw himself as he was, not a wanderer, not a betrayer, not even a redeemer, but a vessel, cracked yet whole, through which the divine had poured. His sins, his doubts, his triumphs, all were threads in a greater weave. The fire within him leaped, joining the lights above, and he felt no loss, only completion. Rest, the voice said, for the flame endures. Water flowed from the stone, a stream clear as crystal, and Elior drank, his body no longer heavy, his soul no longer bound. He returned to the village, but not as he left. His steps were light, his face radiant, as if the desert's light had settled in his eyes. The villagers saw him and wept, not from sorrow but from awe, for they felt the fire in his presence. He spoke no grand words, only sat among them, sharing bread and stories, his laughter like a stream. When his breath stilled that night, under the same stars that had watched his first wandering, no one mourned. They saw the sky ablaze with sparks, each a piece of Elior's flame, carried by those he had loved, taught, healed. The aftermath was not in tombs or tears, but in the lives that burned on. The village grew, its people carrying the fire to new lands, new hearts. The desert, once a place of ash, bloomed in secret places, where streams flowed and trees stood unburned. Travelers spoke of a light seen in the wilderness, a stone that wept water, a valley where stars danced. And those who heard the tale of Elior, the man who carried a fire not his own, paused in silence, their hearts stirred to seek their own flame, to drink from their own stream, to light their own dark. The world turned, and the fire spread, unseen yet eternal, whispering to all who wandered, "You are never too lost, never too broken, for the light to find you. Carry it, and it will carry you home."